Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillah wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulillah. Hello, As-Suffah Academy parents and community members. Hope everyone's doing well. I hope everyone had a blessed and joyous Eid, and I hope everyone is ready for a wonderful summer. I know I am. We all are. So, alhamdulillah. Congratulations to everybody on a successful school year. Every school year is fun and comes with its own idiosyncrasies and its own challenges. And alhamdulillah, I feel good about the school year that we had. And part of wrapping up a school year and continuous improvement in any school is doing data analysis and breaking down our testing data. Not that it is the only thing that makes up a school, but it is an essential part of due diligence for school improvement and to know where your school is at relative to others. And I presented some of that on the annual day. Since then, I've been digging more into it, and data analysis and data sharing is also part of transparency for a school with parents, for them to know how the school evaluates its testing data, as well as how the school relates to other institutions. So I'm going to show our NWEA data and show it relative to the rest of the country, and then different institutions and districts around us in Minnesota. How we do that in Minnesota, most of you I'm sure know, the standardized state test of Minnesota is called the MCA, the Minnesota Comprehensive Assessments. Most schools in the metro area do the MAP test or the NWA test, but the NWEA is administered privately. It's not administered through the Department of Education. So it's only the MCA data from schools and school districts that is made public. So to do a direct comparison of NWA data to MCA data, what you do is you take this study, and NWA does this for each state. They do a new one like every 5 years. They most recently did one in 2025, which they call a linking study, where they take where schools in Minnesota and school districts share with NWEA NWEA has their MAP test data, and then they also share the schools also share their MCA data with the student ID numbers, and from that NWEA does a statistical analysis to determine at each grade level a student who gets this score on the MAP test. On average, they get this score on the MCA, etc. It's called a linking study. We can provide a link to it somewhere. You can just look up NWEA linking study, and you'll find in it, these long charts that go through each grade level, and where that falls on the MCAs and how they relate to MCA scores. That's how we compare to other institutions in the state of Minnesota, because we can only get their MCA data. That's the only thing that's made public, and that's only for districts and charter schools. We can't compare directly to other private schools because they're not bound to make their data public, and most of them do not do that. So we can't do that. Okay. So first, where our students sit as far as national distribution on the NWEA. Okay, so what you're looking at, this chart shows the percentile ranking average of each grade at As-Suffah from fall in the spring. That's the light green, which was the baseline. That's where students were at when they came into the school. And this is an important number for us this year because the student roster, it was at like 170 at the end of the year last year. It went down to I think we lost 40 students, and then we gained 120 and had around 250. So half our student body was new at As-Suffah this year. So, getting baseline data in the fall was very important to know where we were starting off from. And that's part of why I'm most excited about the growth data and how, as I was showing at the annual day, that our growth data outpaced the national average, because it means that we improved at a higher than average expected rate. The challenge now is to continue that each year. But anyway, you see here where our percentile rankings were relative to the rest of the country. from the beginning of the year to the end of the year. Percentile ranking means, so if you look at, say, 8th grade finishing in the 76th percentile, that means on average, our 8th graders outperformed 76% of the country. There is 24% who are higher than them. There's 76% who rated lower than them. That's based on NWA's entire body of test taking, which, as it says, over 10 million students in the country. It's the largest statistical sample that you can get of any testing platform in the United States to do that type of comparison. So it's the most statistically valid. So, if you are at 50, you're right at the national average. Our kindergarten actually started at 50, finished at 50. 3rd, 5th, and 6th grades were the only grades that finished on average below the national median of 50. 3rd grade was just slightly below at 48, but they improved from 41. 5th grade finished at 38. They improved from 36. And the 6th grade finished at 41. They improved from 38. And, mashallah, 7th and 8th grade were just really big success stories. The whole school was. But, again, this shows you what I was saying in the annual day. Because the 7th grade started at the 50th percentile. They were not a below average class relative to the rest of the country and went up to 62. And 8th grade started at 55 and went up to 76. This is in reading. We're looking at here. Okay. 1st grade finished at 62, 2nd grade at 66, and so on. Okay. So you can pause, take a good look at that. I think we'll share these presentations as well. Okay. Next in math. So again, math, you see each grade went up. And again, the national ranking, this is not looking at what their raw score was from the fall to the spring. This is looking at how they related relative to other kids in the same place from the fall to the spring. Okay. So in math, the only class that we had below the 50 percentile in math. No, we did not finish with any classes below the 50 percentile in math. 5th grade started at 43, but they finished on 50. Every other class started above average and finished above average, and they all outpaced the average national growth, as I was saying, on annual day. So those are all success stories. You can see kind of the breakdown here in table format. If you want to pause on this, it shows the RIT score. That's what the NWA scores are called, or the MAP test scores. NWA is the company that does it. MAP is the name of the test. The RIT score is a scaling meter that is called the RIT score. Bismillah. So that's what the scores are called. And you can see the percentile ranking. And these are based on NWA's own published averages from their data set. And you can look up NWA norms reference sheets to see that for yourself. See it linked to on their website, okay? Now, how this relates to state data. Okay, so when you take the linking study and you project how each student at As-Suffah did relative to the MCA, and even when you get the parent paper that prints out the NWA scores, you should see in the bottom left, it gives you the projection there and how they would have done on the MCA. Now, something to understand about the MCAs is the MCAs has 4 scoring levels for the MCAs. There is does not meet, there is partially meets, there is meets, and there exceeds. So if they're at meets or exceeds, you would consider them proficient according to the MCAs. So when we talk about overall proficiency numbers, that's what it means with the MCAs. Now, the thing about the way that the MCAs relate to the MAP test is to get a meets score on the MCAs, you actually have to be above the 50 percentile on the NWEA. So with math, it's like what is it? I have it on here. Okay, so I'll start with reading. Okay, with reading, the cutoff is like 64. So a student who scores at the 50 percentile on the NWEA, when you project their MCA score based on that, the equivalent MCA score is not considered meeting by the state of Minnesota because the state of Minnesota sets a high threshold for what they want to consider meeting. And like the lowest level of getting a proficient score on the MCAs actually puts you nationally in about the 63rd, I think 63rd, 64th percentile in the country. So this blue line shows where the MCA meeting cutoff is for NWEA. And you see with that, relative to MCA scores, most of our classes are still not on average in a place where they would get a meeting score or a proficient score on the MCA, because the MCA has a higher bar for what proficient means. With math, it's even higher. With math, it's like, I believe it's 72. So the 70, someone who gets the lowest level of meeting on the MCA, they project to be in the 72 percentile on the NWA. So, part of why Minnesota does this is they want to just have high standards for education. This is actually important, by the way, if you're ever in tune to national discussions about where Minnesota is on relative to other states and this type of thing. Because sometimes you can see discussion where they say, well, this amount of kids aren't proficient in reading in fourth grade or something like that in Minnesota. Well, if they're using the MCAs as a marker for that, and that's what everyone does because that's the publicly available data on Minnesota, that whole discussion actually has to be qualified by the fact that Minnesota, relative to the rest of the country, has a really high bar for what it considers proficient. And that's a good thing overall. Okay? So this blue line shows where the proficiency cutoff is for the MCAs in Minnesota, and first grade, second grade, and eighth grade are there, but the other classes are lower than that, but they made great strides towards it in this past year. So, when you compare As-Suffah to the states, these blue lines, like you see the two bars here. You see on the left side of your screen, reading and As-Suffah compared to the Minnesota statewide averages. And you see math with As-Suffah on the left compared to the Minnesota statewide averages. And the blue bar is where the proficiency cutoff is for the state averages. So you see above that blue R, we have some orange, and orange represents partially meets. And that's like the chunk of students that we have who they're above the national average of 50 percentile, but they're not at a place yet where they would be projected to be proficient on the Minnesota comprehensive assessments. And it's certainly a goal to next year. Okay, so our projections are that in reading, 37.5% of students at As-Suffah would have been proficient on the MCAs, and in math, 35.5%, whereas the state averages are 49% in reading and 45% in math. So is it a statistically realistic goal for us based on the MCA projections to improve next year by 12% in reading and 10% in math with our proficiency, with our MCA equivalent proficiency, to meet the Minnesota state averages on the MCAs? I hope so. When you project our growth numbers to the MCA scores, I am going to show that like the MCA equivalent of the growth we made was about 10 and 11% in each subject. So if we were to repeat the same amount of growth from this past year, you would project that we would get close to the state average next year. Is it realistic and statistically valid for us to expect the same amount of growth next year after we made some growth after we made that significant amount of growth this previous year? I'm honestly not sure. I have to we'll meet in August and do some analysis and determine what is a statistically valid goal for the next school year, and that's part of our ongoing school improvement process. Okay, but this shows you how As-Suffah compares to Minnesota as a state in reading and math and academic proficiency generally. It's below the state average, but the progress that we are making makes it reasonable to me, with other things considered, that we're on a path to be at the state average soon. And of course, it's our goal as an institution to get way beyond the state average. Okay. Now, when you look at some other school districts, something I want people to understand about, now this is in education in general, but this actually most starkly exists in Minnesota. There is a direct relationship between income level and educational outcomes that is very, very well documented in the United States. Was first recognized and studied thoroughly in a big study done in the 1960s under the presidency of Lyndon Baines Johnson, and has continued ever since. So, like, if you look at this chart, I'm going to show you a chart of the metro school districts, and you have the reading proficiency scores on the vertical axis going up, and then you have the median household income of that school district going horizontally on it. So when you look at this, if I put the school districts up, it looks like this, and you see that there is this upward trend from the left to the right, like this. And based on these numbers, you can actually make a prediction of where each school district should fall on average based on their income level at the school. And a district that is below this line here, this is what they call the regression line statistics, because it averages out the growth from the smallest point to the highest one going left to right. School districts that are below the regression line, they are underperforming based on how you would expect them to perform based on the income level in their school district. And the ones that are above it are actually outperforming. And it's interesting because if you look at the far right, it's well known in the Twin Cities that Edina, Minnetonka, and Wayzata, the three richest school districts, always get the highest scores. That is well known. Based on the regression line, they actually underperform slightly on what you would expect. And I will tell you, there is not a single school district. There's not a single school district that gets above 70% proficiency on either the math or reading MCA score, but that their average property value in their district is over $500,000, and their average median and their median income level is $125,000 or more. You see Eden Prairie on there. You see Matamidi on there at about that $125,000 average mark. Matamidi is a high performing school, or it's a higher income school district that also outperforms this level. It's the school district I live in. I moved to that school district when I was coming back from Saudi Arabia 13 years ago with my family when my children were very, very young, because I knew that the school district was a high-performing school district, and my wife works at a school district. It's a school district I collaborate a lot, and some of the things that they do as part of what I teach As-Suffah school teachers to do, and this whole data analysis and sharing with parents is all part of what these school districts do. They have a heavy emphasis on making this all transparent, so everyone's kind of united on the goals of improving the kids academically. Now, where does As-Suffah fall? Okay, look at the chart here. Look at the reading chart. Where does As-Suffah fall? Because we have income information on the families at As-Suffah. As-Suffah is also what you call a CEP school, which means that we have enough of a percentage of our families who receive social benefits from the state or federal government that we automatically qualify for the free lunch program from the state of Minnesota. And based on the income data that we have from families, the school district that we are closest to in terms of income level is actually Columbia Heights, which is on the bottom left corner there. And we far outperform them, I will tell you, as well as Fridley and St. Paul, which are on there. I'll show direct comparisons in a moment here. But because of the relation between income level and educational outcomes, for me, an important barometer of the progress, and just income level is something you control for when assessing educational quality of the school. Now, it's not that we don't want to blow away the other schools in our income bracket. We do, and actually we're pretty much close to doing that. And, the goal is that our students are going to be performing where kids in Wayzata and Minnetonka and Edina, etc. are. It is possible, and that is what we are building towards. That is the goal. But I want to show how As-Suffah ranks compared to other schools that are what you call CEP schools, meaning they have enough of a percentage of their families on social benefits or at an income level, which is basically means within 130% of the federal poverty line, so that they can do a free and reduced lunch program school-wide. So there are 32 such charter schools in the metro area that qualify as CEP schools, okay? You can look on the list here. You'll probably see some names that are familiar to them. A lot of the schools that are predominantly Muslim kids are CEP schools, of the charter schools in the metro area. Now, what you're looking at here, this is where, based on our fall scores amongst these 32 charter schools that are also CEP schools in the metro area, based on the fall reading scores, As-Suffah would have ranked 17th in MCA proficiency amongst those schools. Based on the spring scores, As-Suffah ranks 6th amongst those schools. In math, based on the fall scores, As-Suffah would have ranked 15th in MCA proficiency. And based on the spring scores, As-Suffah ranks 4th in MCA proficiency amongst those. And again, the fall scores are not assessing the kids as if they are supposed to be in the spring for MCA proficiency. It assesses whether or not they would be proficient on the MCAs at that time when you do the linking study. The linking study is not taking a fall score and projecting it like it's a spring score. The linking study takes the fall scores by themselves and projects whether or not that equals MCA proficiency. Okay, so again, you guys saw the growth that we made, the above average growth we made at the annual at the annual day, and you see it here as far as ranking with these other schools. If you look at these schools and how their MCA scores trended from the 2 previous years of their MCA scores, and you compare that to our growth from the baseline data of the spring to the baseline data of the fall, we massively outpaced those schools in growth. So in reading, of these 32 other schools that are in the same income, charter schools that are in the same income bracket as As-Suffah, the highest one in reading improvement from one year to the next in their last 2 rounds of MCA testing was Star of the North Academy in Spring Lake Park. They improved by 5.6% in their reading proficiency, whereas As-Suffah from fall to spring, we improved 10.7%. Okay. In math, the highest competitor of the charter schools was Higher Ground Academy, which had they had math growth in their last 2 MCA rounds of 8.9% improvement on average. We had 13.3% based on projecting the NWA scores to the MCAs on ours from the baseline data we got in the fall to the end of the year of the spring, which is a full academic year. So again, that is quite good. I'm quite happy with those results. And I do want to get to the school to the point where we're beyond comparing even to those schools. And inshallah, we're close to that. But that is what you that's what you see. Okay. So if you look back at these other districts, so our 37% and 45 and our 35 to 35% proficiency rate on the MCAs, projected on the MCAs, at As-Suffah, you see the blue star here that represents where As-Suffah is, but we're over to the left here because of where we are income-wise, and we outpace St. Paul, we outpace Fridley, we outpace Columbia Heights, we outpace ISD 622. And this is on reading. We're even close to Spring Lake Park, even though their income is their median income is significantly higher than ours. And if we look at math, we're above Spring Lake Park. Math is even better with this, and we're even more significantly ahead of St. Paul and Fridley. We're ahead of Minneapolis here too. So So these results are good. Does it mean that we want to rest on our laurels and put any limitations on us? Absolutely not. But but it gives us an idea of where we're at relative to other places, and it should create a sense in all of us that our students can grow and improve, but there's still plenty of more room to grow and improve. And if we focus on doing that every single year, inshallah, we'll grow as a school. Okay. What are some causes of the growth that we had? Everything plays into it. Every single decision plays into it, okay? The teaching style, the curriculum choices. One big thing I will tell you that is known to create this type of improvement in schools is just the student's time on task in class. And this is something that is a really big differentiator between higher income schools versus schools that serve lower income kids, okay? Ostensibly, the lower income kids come into school with less of their quote unquote basic needs met, and that creates more matters that disrupt the class or whatever and take things off task. Whereas kids of a higher income bracket who, have don't have more basic worries as low income kids, they come to school with less of those matters at hand. So there's just the if you track it, observing classrooms, and there's studies been done. That's just the time on task in higher income schools is just way higher. Okay, but that is something, and I showed you guys in the spring like why it's important for teachers to turn around behaviors directly, and why having a really high standard of behavior and conditioning the students of that is very important, because it just makes it so more learning time takes place overall. What is something that makes a difference with income level and proficiency? Certainly tutoring plays a big part into it, okay? The academic level of parents plays a very big part into it. That is a predictor of academic success, though it is a thing that can be overcome. But especially, even once you get into even like fourth grade, fifth grade level math, you can get into a level of math where there's a lot of integration that's needed. A lot of times kids need tutoring for that. That is something that is way easier for high-income families to afford to kids than low-income families. Reading instruction was done by a very poor methodology in the United States for a very long time. There's been all these law changes reconciling with that over the last few years across the United States. And a big part of that was schools would not focus on teaching kids phonics, just the letter sounds when they were younger. And that seems like something really basic. Well, part of the reason that came into being is, and I can remember this growing up in the south suburbs, the Twin Cities, we didn't do a whole lot of phonics learning because it was almost like an expectation that the parents would make that up at home. Well, you can do that with parents who have the time to make that home because they don't need to be working so much just to get by and that type of thing. So, there's these different types of advantages and disadvantages, So the way we teach, I will say too, I think our intervention tutoring system at As-Suffah, especially the math scores, really played into the growth, which Brother Salah mostly administered. So credit to him. And, we will continue to reach high for our students and work on all cylinders to improve their academic growth, while also having the Islamic character. And if you want my opinion, the Islamic character is more important. But the whole idea as Muslims is it should not be an either or choice one another. And the two complement the other, actually. And honestly, the biggest thing I'm happy about seeing our scores is really the middle school scores and the scores of the 7th and 8th graders. You look at those, the growth in 7th and 8th grade. And I mean, you all know how middle schoolers can be. Okay, they're very moody. They can be a little argumentative, all that type of stuff. But at the same time, when you sit down and talk with them one-on-one, you find that you can reach them. So, nurturing the middle schoolers is always this constant thing of trying to give them a certain message and hoping they're getting it. And it seems like they are, but then it seems like they're not. And then it seems like they are. And this is just really validating to me that the students were taking their learning very seriously. And really that's a credit to you all at home, more so than anything, and how the kids are raised. So we thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Our praise is due to him. We ask him to continue to bless our school, bless our community in Minnesota, and bless the Muslims worldwide. Anything good that came from this comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Anything wrong that came from this comes from the deficiencies within myself. I bear witness that there's none worthy of worship but Allah alone, and we seek repentance from him.